In the last class, the introduction part of lasers, we have discussed a few fundamental mechanisms involved for the production of laser. The laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Because of its outstanding properties, they are used in many. They are for many applications we can use these lasers, like the high monochromaticity, high directionality, and the highly coherent, the highly energetic intensity is very high. So for medical, military, and fiber optic communication system, there are many applications. And the three fundamental mechanisms: absorption, second one is spontaneous emission, and third one stimulated emission. So in general, in any atomic system in material, all atoms are at the ground state, that is lower energy state. The process of transferring a particle or an atom from lower energy state to higher energy state is called as excitation. So while external energy, the particles can be transferred from lower energy to higher energy. Generally, an electron or an atom in the ground state, it absorbs a photon and it jumps from lower state to higher state. This is called as excitation, and the mechanism is called as induced absorption. And in this way, by absorbing photons, the number of atoms or particles in the lower energy state will rise to the higher energy state. But the lifetime of a particle in a higher energy state is very limited, which is of the order of 10 to the power of -8 seconds. So after that, immediately it comes back to the lower energy state by emitting non-coherent radiation. But in some mechanical, in atomic systems, there are some energy states are possible in which the lifetime is more than 10 power -8 seconds, of the order 10 power -3 seconds. These states are called as metastable states. So after the lifetime, the atoms again they transfer from higher energy state to lower energy state. During this process, they emit radiation, which is incoherent radiation. So laser is not possible here. But by emitting photons, scattered photons, the atom comes back to its lower energy state. This is the second process, which is spontaneous emission. And the third one is a stimulated emission. So in this process, the particle or atom in the higher energy state and a photon is allowed to interact with the excited atom, and this stimulates an emission of another photon. So the incident photon, it interacts with an excited atom. During this process, the excited atom transfers to the lower energy state by emitting a similar photon. So in this sense, two photons are released. These two photons are coherent in nature, and in this way, an intensified, highly coherent wave is produced, which is nothing but laser. So this is the principle behind laser. And Einstein tried to relate these three processes of induced absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission by three coefficients, which are known as Einstein coefficients. I think this we have. I have explained those postulates also. Here is the screen now. Is this visible, students? Please.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Einstein coefficients basically they interpret the relation between the transition rates and the three mechanisms of induced absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission by defining coefficients, which are called as Einstein coefficients. So the first one corresponds to the process of induced absorption. According to postulate 1, the probability of induced absorption from state 1 to state 2 is represented by P12. P is probability. 1-2 means moving a particle moving from state 1 to state 2. That is excitation by induced absorption. It depends on the properties of states 1 and 2 and is proportional to the energy density of the incident radiation. Or mathematically, you can write P12 is proportional to rho nu, where rho nu is the energy density, nu is the frequency. So P12 is equal to, if you put the proportionality constant, it is B12 into rho nu, where B12 is called as Einstein coefficient of absorption transition. This is postulate 1. And the second one is, it explains the spontaneous emission transition. According to this, the probability of a spontaneous emission transition from state 2 to state 1. So by itself, the atom comes down to the lower energy state, which is called as spontaneous emission. It depends only on the properties of 1 and 2, and it is independent of energy density rho. So mathematically, it is it is represented by P21 to A21 because external energy is not required for spontaneous emission. So A21 is called as Einstein coefficient of spontaneous emission transition. So this is the second postulate, and the third one refers to postulate 3, which is spontaneous emission transition. So according to this, again the probability of stimulated emission transition from excited state to ground state or state 2 to state 1, again it depends on properties of 1 and 2 and is proportional to energy density, because an external photon interacts with the excited atom so that the atom comes down, transfers from state 2 to state 1 by giving out another photon. So you can write P21 is proportional to rho nu, or P21 is equal to B21 rho nu, where B21 is Einstein coefficient of stimulated emission transition. So the total probability that a particle can transfer from higher energy state to lower energy state, it is either by spontaneous emission or by stimulated emission. So it is a sum of these two. P21 total is P21 spontaneous plus P21 stimulation, or P21 is equal to P21 spontaneous is A21 plus P21 stimulated is B21 rho. This is equation 4. So these are the three postulates, and by using this, Einstein has defined a system in thermal equilibrium and try to correlate and obtain the relation between these three the constants, which are called as Einstein coefficients. I think up to this I have explained in the last class. Now you take the expression for, take the heading expression for Einstein coefficients. Please note down expression for Einstein's coefficients. So first you listen. So let us consider a system in which assembly of atoms are considered. So let us assume an assembly of atoms in thermal equilibrium at a temperature T. Thermal equilibrium means uniform distribution of temperature. So you take an atomic system, the assembly of atoms are there, and they are at the temperature T, and let u is the frequency of incident radiation and the rho nu is the energy density. So for excitation, you need certain external energy, that is energy density. U is the frequency of incident radiation and rho nu is the energy density. Now let us assume there are n1, n2 with the number of atoms in the states 1 and 2 respectively. So n1 number of atoms are there in the lower energy state, and n2 number of atoms are there in the higher energy state respectively. So the first mechanism should be induced absorption. So the number of atoms in state 1 that absorb a photon and rise to state 2 per unit time is given by N1 into P12, because P12 represents the transition of one atom from state 1 to state 2. Like that, there are N1 atoms in the ground state. So the total number of atoms that absorb energy from each photon and excited to higher energy state is represented by N1 into P12. 1 pen costs 5 rupees, 10 pen costs 50 rupees. In the same sense, the probability of one atom to excite is P12. Like that, there are N1 number of atoms. So the total number of atoms they excite to lower energy state to higher energy state by induced absorption is N1 into P12. But from postulate 1, P12 is B12 into rho nu. Therefore, you can write N1 P12 is equal to N1 into P12 can be replaced by B12 rho nu, which is equation 5. From postulate 1, you can get this equation 5. Now, similarly, there are two processes so that an atom in the higher energy state comes to lower energy state, either by spontaneous emission or by stimulated emission. So the total probability, there are N2 atoms in higher energy state or state 2. So the total probability of N2 atoms in state 2 to drop to state 1 is either by spontaneous emission or by stimulated emission. So N1, it is N2 P21. So I'm printing this state. Correct this. So N2 P21 is equal to, it is the sum of P21 spontaneous plus P21 stimulated emission, which is represented by N2 A21 plus N2 B21 rho nu. From equations 3 and 4, you can get this. So the first one, equation 5, represents the probability of induced absorption and the next equation represents the probability of re-excitation, either by spontaneous emission or stimulated emission. But at equilibrium, absorption and emission must occur equally, because we are assuming that it is a thermal equilibrium. How many photon atoms are excited from lower energy state to higher energy state? The same number of atoms it again comes back to the from higher energy state to lower energy state. That is, N1 P12 is equal to N2 P21. The probability of induced absorption is equal to the total probability of emission. So N1 P12 is equal to N2 P21. By putting these values, we will be getting, instead of N1 P12 from equation 5, you can substitute N1 B12 rho nu, that is equal to N2 P21 is equal to N2 A21 plus N2 P21 rho nu. This is equation 6. Is it okay, girls?
Yes, sir.
Boys, shall I repeat once again this one?
Once repeat, sir.
Yeah. So there are three postulates. First one is Einstein coefficient of induced absorption, which is represented by equation 1. P12 is equal to B12 only. Then second one postulate is P21 spontaneous is equal to A21 only, because there is no external source required for spontaneous emission. Third postulate is P21 stimulated is equal to, it is represented by B21 rho nu, because again it depends on the external energy source. So the total probability, sum of spontaneous emission probability plus probability of stimulated emission. You can write N2 A21 plus N2 B21 to equation 4. Now you should obtain a relation between Einstein coefficients. Further, let us consider an assembly of atoms in thermal equilibrium. So consider a system in which number of atoms are there at thermal equilibrium and T is the temperature. Let nu represents the frequency of incident radiation and rho nu is the energy density. So for convenience, let us assume there are n1 number of atoms are there in the lower energy state, that is the state 1, and n2 number of atoms are there in the higher energy state, that is the state 2. Now, initially by using a photon, one atom can be excited from lower energy state to higher energy state, which is called as induced absorption. Like that, there are n1 number of atoms are there. So the total number of atoms in state 1 that absorb a photon and excite to state 2 per unit time is given by n1 into p12, because p12 is the probability of exciting one atom. There are such n1 number of atoms are there. So the total number of atoms is n1 into p12. But from postulate 1, p12 is equal to b12 rho nu. Therefore, you can write n1 p12 is equal to n1 into p12 can be replaced with b12 rho nu. This is equation 5. Similarly, the total probability of n2 atoms which are there in the higher energy state to transfer to state 1, either by spontaneous emission or by stimulated emission, is represented by N2P21, which is nothing but P21 is A21 plus P21 rho nu. So you should add N2 here. So N2P21 is equal to N2A21 plus N2P21 rho nu. But at equilibrium, absorption and emission are same, must occur equally. So you can equate N1 P12 is equal to N2 P21 by putting the values from 5 and above equation. Finally, you can arrive N1 B12 rho nu is equal to N2 A21 plus N2 B21 rho nu. This is equation 6. Please note down this. Did you copy, students?
No, sir.
Shall I wait? Yes. Copy this. I'll wait for 1 minute. Shall I proceed? Boys,
Yes, sir.
girls.
Yes, sir.
So this is equation 6. Then you can here take common this bring N2 B2 and rho nu to the left hand side and equate the terms. So that's what we have to do. N1 B1 the same I have represented there. N1 B1 to rho nu is equal to N2 A21 plus N2 B21 rho nu, equation 6. And you bring the second term to the left hand side and take rho nu as common. So it can be written as rho nu into N1 B12 minus N2 B21 is equal to N2 A21. Then rho nu is equal to, you take this in the left hand side, it comes to the numerator. So this is N2 A21 by N1 B12 minus N2 B21. Further, you divide with N2 and the numerator and denominator, and also take B21 as common. Then you can finally get A21 by B21. If you take it as common, it is N1 by N2 into B12 by B21 minus 1. For mathematics simplicity, what I have done here is I have divided both numerator and denominator by N2. So in the numerator it will be eliminated. In the denominator N2 will come. In the first term N1 by N2 remains, and in the second term N2 into gets cancelled. So it will be A21 by N1 by N2 B12 minus B21. Again in the denominator I can take B21 as common, so that the final expression becomes A21 by B21 into N1 by N2 already is there, and B12 by B21. Because I took B21 as common, so that in the second term in the denominator you will be taking minus 1. This is equation 7. So this is only a mathematical part. After that, according to Boltzmann distribution law, the number of atoms and in the levels N1 and N2 with energy states E1 and E2 in thermal equilibrium is given by this. You should take directly. N1 is equal to N0 into e to the power of minus E1 by Kt. N2 is equal to N0 into e to the power of minus E2 by Kt. From statistical mechanics, you can derive this, but here you should take directly. So the distribution of N1 number of particles in energy state E1 is represented by N1 is equal to N0 into e to the power of minus E1 by Kt, and N2 is equal to N0 into e to the power of minus E2 by Kt, where K is Boltzmann constant, T is absolute temperature, N0 is total number of atoms in two different energy states. Please note down this mathematical part. This we should take directly, expression for N1 and N2. Please note down this. If you understood this, is it okay? This mathematical part, boys?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Simple rearrangement of terms. Then you should take Boltzmann distribution law for two different energy states. You may get this Einstein coefficients. Obtain the relation between Einstein coefficients. You have to do all this. Shall I proceed, students? Girls?
Yes, sir.
So Boltzmann distribution law for particles N1 and N2 in states E1 and E2 is expressed in this equation. So if you take N2 by N1, then it will be e to the power of minus E2 minus E1 by Kt. Because in the previous expression, if you take N2 by N1, you can take, then N0 gets cancelled. So minus becomes plus. So finally it will be N2 by N1 is equal to e to the power of minus E2 minus E1 by Kt. But E2 minus E1 is h nu. The difference between two energy states is nothing but Planck's constant h nu. Therefore, N2 by N1 is equal to e to the power of minus h nu by Kt. If we reverse this one, then N1 by N2 is equal to e to the power of h nu by Kt. Therefore, once you substitute in equation 7, 7 is rho nu is equal to A2 by B21 into N1 by N2, B12 by B21 minus 1. Instead of this N1 by N2, you should substitute e to the power of h nu by kT. So something smaller. Here I should write from equation 7. From equation 7, we can finally get this expression. Here also you will be having minus 1. So instead of N1 by N2, you can substitute e to the power of h nu by kT into B12 by B21 minus 1. Because from 7 you have A21 by B21 into N1 by N2. So it could N2 by N1 is N1 by N2 is nothing but e to the power of h nu by kT. That's what we have taken here. So it is e to the power of h nu by kT, B12 by B21 minus 1 into B21. This is equation 8. Please note this. From Boltzmann distribution law, we have the distribution of N1 atoms and N2 atoms. N1 is N0 into e to the power of minus E1 by kT. N2 is N0 into e to the power of minus E2 by kT. N2 by N1 is e to the power of minus E2 minus E1 by kT. N0 gets cancelled here. But E2 minus E1 is energy difference, which is h nu. So N2 by N1 is equal to e to the power of minus h nu by kT. If you reverse this, N1 by N2 is equal to e to the power of plus h nu by kT. In equation 7, instead of N1 by N2, you can substitute e to the power of h nu by kT. That's what we did here. So it is A21 by B21 into e to the power of h nu by kT into B12 minus B12 by B21 minus 1, which is equation 8. Shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
But according to Planck's radiation law, we have rho nu is equal to, this is the expression 8 by h nu q by c cube 1 by e to the power of h nu by kT minus 1. This is according to Planck's radiation law. Previous one is also 8. You take the number, equation number, it is little bit common. You take this as 9, 10, 11. After that, I will correct this one. So, according to Planck's radiation law, rho nu is equal to.
Before slide, sir, once.
Yes, ma'am.
Before slide, show once.
See. Okay. Rho nu is A21 by B21 into e to the power of h nu by kT, B12 by B21 minus 1. What we did is, instead of N1 by N2, we have substituted e to the power of h nu by kT. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So from Planck's radiation law, we have the expression for energy density rho nu is equal to e to the power of E pi h nu q by c cube 1 by e to the power of h nu by kT minus 1. Comparing these two equations, the previous one and this equation, you can write that B12 by B21 is equal to 1 and A21 by B21 is equal to 8 by h nu q by c cube. If you see the previous expression, in this A21 by B21, it is 8 by h nu q by c cube, and this component B12 by B21 is nothing but 1 only here. So 1 you have taken. So B12 by B21 is equal to 1 and A21 by B21 is equal to 8 by h nu q by c cube. So if B12 is equal to B21, that means the probability of stimulated emission B21 is represented with V12 is the Einstein coefficient for spontaneous emission transition. V21 is the Einstein coefficient for stimulated emission transition. Both are same. So the probability of induced absorption. V12 is the probability of induced absorption, and V21 is the probability of stimulated emission transition. So from equation about the 9, V12 by V21 is equal to 1. Therefore, V12 is equal to V21, which means the probability of stimulated emission is same as that of induced absorption. So how many photons are absorbed by the atoms in the ground state? Finally, the same number of photons can be released. So this is the relation between the induced absorption coefficient and stimulated emission coefficient. And the second expression is A21 by B21 is equal to 8 by h nu cube by c cube. It means A21 by B21 is directly proportional to nu cube because phi h c are constants. That means the probability of spontaneous emission increases rapidly with the energy difference between two states. So nu is the frequency of incident radiation. Therefore, the probability of spontaneous emission increases rapidly with energy difference between two states. So if more energy difference is there, more energy is radiated, because the atom can be de-excited from higher energy state to lower energy state by emitting photons. So this is the relation between Einstein coefficient. The same is expressed here. From equation 10, A21 by B21 is proportional to nu cube. That is, the ratio of Einstein coefficients of spontaneous emission to stimulated emission is directly proportional to the cube of the frequency of incident photon. That means the rate of spontaneous emission increases rapidly with the energy difference between two states. And also from the previous expression, B12 is equal to B21, which is thermodynamically the probability of stimulated emission is the same as that of induced absorption. So these are the relations between Einstein coefficients for induced absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission. Up to this, we should write. So the final conclusions are represented here. From comparing equations, taken those two equations, you can arrive V12 by V21 is equal to 1. That means V12 is equal to V21, which represents the probability of stimulated emission is same as that of induced absorption. And the second one is A21 by B21 is equal to 8 by h nu cube by c cube. From this, we can conclude that the probability of spontaneous emission increases with the energy difference between two states, or the ratio A21 by B21 is directly proportional to the cube of frequency of incident radiation or incident photon. So these are the relations between Einstein coefficients for induced absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission. Up to this, you should write. Please note down this. Previous, shall I put the previous one? First, you take this one.
Sir, done, sir. Next slide.
One question I will ask, nobody has asked, that's why I am only asking. I have explained this stimulated emission, and in this process, the atom is or particle is already in the excited state, and a photon is allowed to interact with that. My question is, why this atom is not going further higher energy level? Why it is coming down by emitting photon? Can you answer this? You got my question? Boys, the process of stimulated emission, the atom is in the excited state.
Sir, due to metastable state.
So what? My point is, the atoms are in the metastable state. A photon is allowed to interact because for stimulated emission, you need an external photon. So the external photon should interact with the atom which is there in the metastable state. Why it is not going to still upper energy? Why it is coming to the ground state by emitting a similar photon? What may permit the excited atom to come down to the ground state by emitting a photon?
Due to its lifetime, sir.
Within the lifetime only the photon is interacting with the atom. No? Suppose you take a particle, you apply some energy. What happens? It goes to, it gets momentum. No? You think and answer this later. Okay. Think. Nothing is there, it's very simple.
Stability.
Because the excitation energy levels are limited, it gets saturated because by absorbing the photon, it goes to its highest energy level. So only the way it has is it should come down. There is no option. It is interaction of radiations only. Don't assume a photon will hit the electron so that the electron goes. It's not like that. It's an interaction. Exchange of energy takes place. And whenever it absorbs a photon, it goes to its higher maximum energy state. It can't go further because it cannot cross the boundary of the space, the material space. So the option is it should go to the next possible lower energy state. During this process, it emits energy. So excitation and de-excitation, at equilibrium, it is a continuous process. It's an atomic interaction. Because of that, only by interacting with the photon, it comes down to the lower. We are imagining that atom is come to the lower energy state by emitting a similar photon. Like that, two photons are released which are photons. This you should understand. So here again it is a repetition for producing laser, as already we have discussed. Generally, the lifetime of a particle in the higher energy state or excited state is very limited, which is of the order of 10 to the power of minus 8 seconds and is called as lifetime. However, there are certain energy states are available so that the lifetime is more than this 10 power minus 8 seconds. These are called as metastable state. You should understand this. Whenever some energy is given to an atom in the ground state, by absorbing a photon, it goes to initially a little bit higher energy level. Spontaneously, after within no time, it settles down in another energy state, which is called as the metastable state, which is non-radiative. So that it lasts for few milliseconds in the higher energy state, which is called as metastable state. And the population is defined as the number of atoms per unit volume in an energy level is called as the population. So generally, in general conditions, more number of atoms or particles will be available in lower energy state. So E2 is greater than E1, E1 refers to lower energy state, E2 refers to higher energy state, E2 is greater than E1 and N1 is greater than N2. That means more number of atoms are available in the lower energy state than in the excited state. But making number of atoms more in the higher energy state is called as population inversion. So you should remember this definition. A state of the medium where a higher lying electronic level has a higher population than the lower lying electronic state, then it is called as population inversion. So in some states we are making in such a way that more number of atoms are available in the higher energy state. This state is called as metastable state, and the phenomenon is called as population inversion. So what we should write generally, in general conditions, more number of atoms are present in the lower energy state than higher energy state, which is N1 is greater than N2. Making N2 more in the higher energy state is called as population inversion. So once population inversion is achieved, there exists more number of atoms available in the higher energy state than in the lower energy state. This phenomenon is called as population inversion. That means the definition is a state of the medium where a higher lying electronic level, higher energy state has higher population, means more number of atoms available than lower lying electronic level, that is lower energy state. This phenomenon is called as population inversion. So if you see the diagram, From ground state to initially they are excited, and few comes back to the ground state, but most of the atoms they settles in the intermediate state, which is called as metastable state, where the lifetime is of the order 10 to the power of minus 3 seconds. So if you compare this, 10 power minus 3 is much greater than 10 power of minus 7. So these states, these are called as metastable states. And making higher energy state with more number of atoms or particles is called as population inversion. You take this diagram and you take the definition also.
So once you can show the last slide.
This one. This one.
Yes, sir.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Then you take this one. Please take the diagram also. I'll give 1-2 minutes to take this diagram. Shall I proceed?
1 minute, sir. 1 minute.
Yeah. For population inversion, what you should write is what I explained, you take it as notes. Generally, the number of particles N2 at the higher energy level is less than the number of particles N1 in lower energy state. That is, N1 is greater than N2 in general condition. So, making number of particles N2 more in higher energy level than the number of particles N1 in lower energy state is called as population inversion. And a system which achieves population inversion is called as active system. So once population inversion is achieved, then it is ready to produce the laser. So this system, this is called as active system. So these definitions you should understand. So the process of sending of the atoms from lower energy state to higher energy state by supplying the suitable energy is called as pumping. So whenever actually the atoms should excite from lower energy state to higher energy state, then they should attain metastable state. From metastable state, they come to ground state by emitting number of photons which are coherent, and so it emits a laser. So the process of sending the atoms from lower energy state to higher energy state by external energy, by using external energy, is called as pumping. So there are different mechanisms are there. An important one is optical pumping. That means allowing the photons to interact with the atoms in the ground state, so that the atoms or electrons can rise to higher energy state. So this this is called as optical pumping. By using photons, a light source is used to supply luminous energy, and generally this is given in the form of short flashes of light, so that atoms can be excited. And the second one is direct electron excitation or electric discharge. By applying voltage also, you can excite the atoms from ground state to higher energy state. This is another method. And also inelastic atom-atom collision also. So excited atoms collide inelastically with another atoms and provide them enough energy to excite them to the higher energy level. So sometimes what happens, the atoms which are already excited can interact with the atoms in the ground state, so that the atoms in the ground state excited to the higher energy state. So this is also possible. And the fourth one is during chemical reaction. Radiations come out of the chemical reaction. You combine by mixing some chemicals without any other external energy, the atoms can go to the higher energy states. So these are the four methods so that the process of excitation takes place. The method of sending atoms or particles from lower energy state to higher energy state is called as pumping. So there are important methods are optical pumping using a flash of light using photons or light source excitation of atoms takes place. Second one by applying voltage, and third one atoms which are already excited can interact with atoms in the ground state so that they can excite. And also during chemical reaction also by mixing some chemicals without any external energy source, the atoms can excite to their higher energy states. So these are the methods. And you should understand the principle of laser also. So generally, what the three mechanisms are very important for producing laser. So initially by induced absorption, some atoms are get excited, and some come down, but many of them get settled in their metastable state. After finishing their lifetime, initially what happens is one atom it comes to the metastable state to lower energy state by emitting a photon. So this photon is allowed to interact with another atom in the higher metastable state, and during this process, the atom comes down by emitting a photon. So two photons are released. That is the process of stimulated emission. Again, these two photons they interact with the two atoms in the excited state. So during this process, these two atoms comes down to the ground state by emitting two photons, so that the number of photons will become 4. So it goes like this, and a laser beam is produced. A photon ray is produced, which oscillates back and forth, and by controlling the system, you can produce the laser, which is principle behind laser. So in stimulated emission, the emitted photon travels in the same direction as that of incident photon. So these two photons again stimulate the emission of two more photons, so that from two excited atoms, the two excited atoms return to the ground state, and four photons are released, which are coherent. These four photons interact with the four more excited atoms, so that the number will become 8. Like that, number of photons will increase and travel in the same direction, which is nothing but a laser. A highly energetic monochromatic coherent beam is produced, which is called as laser beam. This is the principle behind laser. The same is expressed in the diagram. Initially from the ground state, the atoms are excited. Some return to the ground state, but most of them they come to the metastable state. Then initially by spontaneous emission, it is come to the ground state by emitting a photon. This photon interacts with an atom in the excited state, so the two photons are released. These two photons again stimulate the emission of two more photons from two excited atoms, so that the number will become 4. This process continues, and finally a laser beam is produced. This is called as lasing action or principle of laser. And for that you need different components. Initially you need an active medium. That means a materials from which excitation and de-excitation takes place. So this is called as an active medium is required. And initially what we should do, this active medium should be interacted with the energy, because external energy is required. Pumping is required. It may be optical pumping or electronic discharge, chemical pumping, or by using inelastic collisions. So excitation mechanism or pumping should be given to this active medium. Then laser beam is produced. Then an optical resonator will be there. So a highly reflecting mirror, partially reflecting mirrors or devices are arranged here. Suppose the laser beam comes in the left direction, because there is a perfect reflector, it gets back. Until and unless it has to interact with another excited atom, it should go in the right direction only. So it oscillates like that. So the left side it is perfectly reflected. At the right side only it is partially reflected. Whenever the laser is having sufficient energy, then only it can burst through the half-shaded mirror and coming out as a laser beam output. So by this principle, only in which direction you need a laser beam, that is also can be done by using this optical resonator. This is a fundamental principle to produce laser. Whatever may be the material you device or pumping mechanism you have taken, these three things are very important to produce laser. So requirements for lasing action, first one is pumping source. So which mechanism is by using photons or by using electric discharge, more number of atoms should be there in the higher energy state to achieve population inversion, which is called as pumping. Further, you need a device which is active medium, which has a metastable state. So all materials, atomic systems cannot be, only certain specific they synchronize with this pumping source. So that is called as active medium. And the third one is optical resonator or cavity. So the resonator is basically a feedback device that directs the photons back and forth through the laser medium. Left side you have a perfect reflector, right side you have a partial reflector. Only the rays which are sufficient energy can escape through the right side mirror. Left side there is no option. So direction is also confined here. So these three are important accessories required for producing laser. Please you take the screenshot of this. You have to draw these diagrams also, lasing condition or lasing action. Is it clear? Any doubt in this? Students? Girls? Please respond. Boys?
No, sir.
Shall I explain once? Any
Yes,
doubt?
sir.
Okay. So listen carefully. For producing laser, you need three important phenomena. The first one is the excitation. Atoms should move from lower energy state to metastable state. So how an atom can move from lower energy state to higher energy state? By absorbing energy. So the excitation of an atom or particle from lower energy state to higher energy state, this is called as pumping. So there are four different methods are there. By allowing photons to interact with the atoms in the ground state, so that the atoms absorb the energy, they can get excited. Otherwise, another method is you apply certain voltage, high voltage, so that the atoms gain energy, they excite to the higher energy state. Otherwise, you interact the ground state atoms with already excited atoms in inelastic collision. During this process also the atoms can be excited. Or chemical reaction, using certain chemical conditions, the excitation of atoms from lower energy to higher energy can take place. These are the four methods. These are called as pumping methods, so that excitation takes place. This we have discussed here. Then after excitation, the atoms they settle down at their metastable state. Then what is the principle of laser? Once the lifetime is completed in the metastable state, the first atom, it returns to the ground state by emitting a photon. So a photon is released. Now this photon, it interacts with another excited atom, because population inversion is achieved. More number of atoms are there in the higher energy level, which is called as population inversion. So by spontaneous emission, initially one photon is released, and this photon interacts with another excited atom in the higher energy state. So this is a stimulated emission. So a particle, when it is interacted with a photon, then it comes to the ground state by emitting a similar photon. The same happens here. So once the photon knocks out an excited atom, the atom returns to the ground state by emitting a similar photon. So already one photon is there, another photon is released because of stimulated emission. Two photons are there. Now these two photons, again they interact with the two excited atoms. So these excited atoms return to the ground state by emitting two similar photons. Don't assume it is 2, it may be 100 also. So here 4 photons are released. So these 4 photons interact with 4 more excited atoms, so that the total number will become 8. Like that, number of photons are released, and if you control this, you can get a photon rate, which is nothing but laser, because it is highly coherent and intensity is also very high, and high directionality is also there. This is called as the principle of laser, or this is also known as lasing action. So to produce laser, first you need a pumping device which excites the atoms from ground state to higher energy state, either by optical pumping or by electronic discharge or by collision with the excited atoms or by chemical process. So there are for any method, so but which is called as pumping source. And the second important one, you need an active medium. Material or device is required. When it should consist of number of atoms to be excited. So the material is called as active medium. And also to confine the laser beam, you need a resonator cavity, so that only in which direction you need a laser, in that direction only the laser should produce. Otherwise it goes, scatters all around. This is not required. It will not serve the purpose. So you need a resonator cavity, optical resonator, which consists of a high reflecting surface in the left side and a partial reflector in the right side. Fully reflecting medium, fully reflecting mirror, and half reflecting mirror on either side of active medium. So once the photons are released, suppose the photon goes in the left side direction, it is perfectly reflected by the reflector. So it has to come from left to right only. During this, what it do? it interacts with an excited atom so that other photon is released. So this process, it's like millions of atoms are there, they interact with the photons and a ray is produced. Ray goes in the left side direction, it is completely reflected by the resonator in the left side. But in the right side, there is an option. Whenever sufficient energy is acquired, reaches, then it can escape through the partial reflector and comes out as a laser beam output. So by this, these are three important things. One is pumping mechanism. Second one is active medium in which population inversion should be achieved. And third one is optical resonator. So that only in one direction the output laser can travel. So these are the three important accessories for producing laser. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
This I'll do these notes also. So basing on this same principle, there are different types of lasers are there based on their active materials. The first one, after the invention of laser, the first laser produced by the method Ruby laser, which is a solid state laser, this is one type. After that, the gaseous laser is invented by using helium neon gas mixture, gas laser. And before that, liquid dye by using chemical reaction, liquid dye, using liquid dye also you can produce laser. And the recent one is the semiconducting laser, gallium arsenide, gallium phosphide, all these we produce a laser, like even in movie theaters also you can see some flash will be there on the, even in pointers, lighters also you can see, which is a simple semiconducting laser which is having a PN type material. But with a different combination. It's not ordinary germanium and silicon. As per our syllabus is concerned, we are going to read three types of lasers. The first one is Ruby laser or solid state laser. Second one is gas laser, which is helium neon laser. And the third one is the semiconducting laser, which is gallium arsenide laser. So what is the construction and the working principle of all these three lasers we are going to discuss. Liquid dye we are not using. The remaining three we are using. First one is solid state laser, which is Ruby laser. We are going to discuss. It is there in the syllabus. Second one, helium neon laser, which is gaseous laser, and the third one, semiconductor laser. Please note on this. Lasers are classified into, to take these three only: solid state laser, Ruby laser, helium neon laser, and semiconductor laser. Today I will explain first Ruby laser. In time permits, I go to the second one. Otherwise, tomorrow I will complete this. Gaseous laser and semiconductor laser. Two applications of lasers are there. Most likely today, tomorrow I will complete this in the regular class. Please note down this. The first one is Ruby laser. Types of laser. The first one is Ruby laser. Please you draw this diagram because in the exam you should draw. I'll give 2 minutes. Please, meanwhile I drink water. You take this diagram. Shall I start this one? Ruby laser, students. Did you took the diagram, boys?
Yes, sir.
Shall I start explanation? How it works, Ruby laser, girls? Shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first type of, after the concept of this laser, scientists try to produce laser because that time it was very required. The technique of holography has been given theoretically. It is a three-dimensional. It is not there in the syllabus. Holography is a method by which you can observe a three-dimensional image of an object. So human eye can see only two-dimensional. It's sort of feeling only, three-dimensional. Isn't it? Blackboard or computer screen, everything is it's two-dimensional. What is three-dimensional? Probably in movies, some 3D movies are there, isn't it? No? In Prasad IMAX, you have a 4D theater. You may be given a special class. If you see, suppose the villain fires a bullet, you feel that it hits your head. It's come like it's a sort of animation. By using a device, you can feel that it is a three-dimension. Relatively, your chair also will be moving. Suppose if you have visited the theater, you can understand. So holography is a technique you can observe a three-dimensional image of an object because during medical surgeries you require this three-dimensional animation, and for that a powerful light source is required. That time it was not there. Lasers were not invented, but after the invention of laser, it was successfully used in the technique of holography, 3D animation, and many applications are there. So the first type of laser that was introduced is a solid state laser, which is called as a ruby laser. So ruby, it is a crystal of aluminum oxide, Al2O3, in which some aluminum atoms are replaced by chromium oxide, Cr2O3. So it's a mixture of Al2O3 and chromium oxide. You have a 0.05% of Al2 chromium only, and Al2O3 aluminum oxide, which is mixed with chromium oxide with very less percentage. This is called as a ruby crystal. And the active material, as we have discussed, three are required. One is active system in which excitation, population inversion, and stimulated emission must take place. So that material is called as active medium. So here in this case, the active material is the ruby. In the active, it is chromium ions. Cr3 plus ions are active materials. Excitation, de-excitation, and they respond for stimulated emission. And finally, laser can be produced. So active material is chromium here. And as you see, initially a ruby rod of a specific blue colored one, it is actually a ruby rod. So a ruby rod is taken in a quadri tube, and this at the left side of the quadri tube, a completely reflecting surface is there, and at the right side you can observe a partial reflecting surface is there. And this is this quadri tube. It is surrounded by a helical xenon flash tube, which provides the pumping light. So this works on the process of optical pumping. By giving a light rays, excitation of chromium atoms takes place, and by de-excitation it produces laser. So for this, it is surrounded by a helical xenon flash lamp, which is given to the power source. By applying this power, a flash of light will be focused on the ruby crystal. So it is surrounded by this xenon flash tube. And a cooling arrangement is also there. Cool water circulation is there here, because this flash of light will last for several milliseconds and some 1000 joules of energy is released. Only a part of this energy is required to excite chromium atoms, and the remaining light energy, it is dissipated in the form of heat. So because of that, the device gets heated. To maintain the temperature constant, a water circulation cooling provision is there so that the temperature will be maintained. The water will absorb the heat energy, and it can come out so that the fresh cool water can be allowed to pass through the system. Like the cooling arrangement will be there so that the temperature will be maintained. So this is the construction of ruby laser. So ruby laser It is a solid state laser, and ruby crystal, it is a rod which is made up of aluminum oxide Al2O3, in which few chromium oxide atoms are there. It is impurity is there, so it's a combination of Al2O3 and Cr2O3. 0.05% of Cr2O3 is taken. Its length is 4 centimeters and radius is around 0.05 centimeters. And it is initially placed in a quad tube, and it is in the left side of the quad tube a perfect reflecting material surface is arranged, and at the right side a partially half silvered material mirror is there, partially reflecting surface is there. And this quad tube is surrounded by a xenon flash lamp which is connected to the power source, and by applying high voltage, this xenon flash lamp will give, it's like mobile focus on it, mobile flashlight, you know now. In the same sense, at that time, olden days, similarly, I think 56 years back, this was designed. It gives a flash of light on the ruby crystal, so chromium atoms will be excited. So this, in this, a cooling arrangement is also provided, because whenever xenon flash is on, several million, thousand joules of energy is released. A part of this energy is sufficient for the chromium atoms to excite. The remaining energy dissipated in the form of heat. So the apparatus gets heated to maintain the temperature constant. A cooling arrangement is there so that the device temperature will be maintained. So this is the construction of ruby laser. Any doubt you ask, then I will go to the procedure. So ruby rod is a combination of Al2O3 and 0.05% of chromium. Chromium is the active material. Optical pumping, the excitation takes place by helical xenon flash lamp around ruby rod, which is connected to the power source. Resonant cavity, it is a combination of fully reflecting surface and partial reflecting surface. To make the beams parallel to each other, curved mirrors are arranged to the resonant cavity so that the optical beam produced is parallel. And resonator mirrors are coated with multi-layer dielectric materials to reduce the absorption loss in the mirrors. So dielectric materials, they are perfect reflecting surfaces, and resonators acts as frequency selector and also give rise to directionality to the output beam. So all this can be achieved by placing these completely reflecting surface and partially reflecting surface. And water is circulated to maintain the temperature as lot of heat is generated. Because whenever flash lamp is on, a flash of light is focused on the ruby rod, and during this this lasts for several milliseconds, and some 1000 joules of energy is released. The part of it is only required, the remaining is lost in the form of heat. The atom gets heated, the apparatus gets heated, so a cooling arrangement is provided so that a constant temperature will be maintained. So this is the construction of ruby laser, and the procedure is very simple. So initially, by using this power source, the flash of light is allowed to incident on the ruby crystal. That is, the ruby crystal is rod is irradiated with light of xenon flash. So chromium atoms are excited, and they travel to their higher energy level. Some excited atoms immediately they return to the ground state, but most of the atoms they settle in their metastable state, for which the lifetime is more than 10 to the power of minus 8 seconds, which is approximately of the order of 10 to the power of minus 3 seconds. So this continues, and population inversion is achieved. That means more number of chromium atoms are available in the higher energy state than that of lower energy state. So once this is achieved, population inversion is achieved, lasing action starts. One atom, excited atom in the metastable state, it transfers to the lower energy state by emitting a photon. Now this photon knocks out a excited atom in the metastable state. Then that atom comes to the ground state, so that by emitting a similar photon, which is a stimulated emission. So the two photons are released, and these two photons again they interact with the two more excited atoms. So 4 photons are released, and these two excited atoms come to the ground state. This process continues. So a laser beam, a photon beam is produced, and it travels along the quad tube. Suppose it travels in the left side, because of the completely reflecting surface which is coated with the dielectric material, it gets reflected completely, and it has to move from left to right only. And like that, it has to interact with another excited atom so that another photon can be released. So it becomes more stronger and stronger. So finally, highly energetic laser beam is produced. Once sufficient energy is achieved, this escapes to the partial reflecting surface, because partial reflecting surface Photons which are having less energy, they will not pass through the partially reflecting surface. They have to get reflected, and again they have to de-excite another atom by getting a photon. So this process continues. Once a highly energetic photon beam, which is laser beam, is produced, then finally it escapes through the partially reflecting surface and serves as laser beam output. So this is the working principle of Ruby laser. Is this okay, students?
Sir.
Please take this.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The same principle we are using here. You take this diagram. So initially, if you see the diagram, the particles are Ruby chromium atoms are at E0 level or E1 level, let us assume. Then by optical pumping, they get excited to the higher energy level. Here representation is little bit different, don't worry. Any energy, the higher energy level. Then they comes to the metastable level. Some atoms may come to the ground state, but most of the chromium atoms they settle in the metastable level. So it becomes more populated than the lower energy state. More number of chromium atoms now available in the metastable level, metastable state than in the lower energy state. So population inversion is achieved. So once population inversion is achieved, then first atom, chromium atom, comes to the ground state by emitting a photon. This photon interacts with another excited atom. 2 photons are released. It returns to the ground state atom. These 2 photons knock out 2 more excited atoms. So 2 photons, fresh photons are released. Their number becomes 4. So this process continues. A laser beam is produced. And remember, this is a pulsed laser. Whenever there is a flash of xenon flash of light, then excitation, de-excitation takes place. It produces laser. Again, the flash will become off. Again, it takes some time. Again, the flash will on, so that again excitation takes place. So you will be getting some time gap is here. That's why you will be getting pulsed laser. It is not a continuous laser. This is the main drawback of Ruby laser. This diagram you change a little bit. You take E0 as E1, the second one E2 only. Metastable state, don't name this one. You call it as metastable state only. Because notation is different. We have taken from Google this diagram. So in different books, notations are different, but concept is same. Don't get confused by this notation. Girls, is it okay? The construction and working of Ruby laser? Somebody respond from girl side. Yes, no response. So applications of Ruby laser. So distance measurement by producing this pulsed laser, pulse echo technique, you can find the distance between 2 objects. Laser from laser device to, you want to find out the distance, because without any deviation it goes. That is the advantage. So it strikes it, and the distance can be measured by using pulse echo technique. And also it is used in holography. What I have explained previously, 3D imaging of objects. You can use these Ruby lasers. Atmospheric ranging, scattering and measurement will be used. Trimming resistors and drilling high quality holes. Lasers are used so that they can be used to drill high quality holes, because they are highly energetic. And in many military applications, target ranging, designators, range finders, they can be used in military applications, because during that time of World War, these are used. And hair removal, laser treatment also there. Ruby laser, pulse laser, you can do. These are the applications. But there are certain drawbacks also. It requires high pumping power. So which is the drawback? It should give high energy to produce a high energetic laser. That is the main drawback of this one. And efficiency is very low, because only green component of pumping of light is used, while the rest of components are left unused. So xenon flash tube gives certain energy. Only green wavelength is used to excite chromium atoms. Remaining the components are not used. So this is high energy is wasted here, and it is not continuous. This is also one of the big drawback. Only pulses of laser can be produced. There is a duration of microseconds for each pulse of laser. So defects due to crystalline imperfection are also present in the laser. So ruby, it's not a perfect crystal, so that this also cause some distortion in the laser pulse. And always you need to cool the device because of the flash of light. High energy is released. Only a part of energy is sufficient. So remaining energy you should maintain cooling system. All these are drawbacks of ruby lasers. It is the first one, first solid state laser. And there are certain applications at the same time. There are certain drawbacks also there in the ruby laser. Only this I'll explain helium neon laser and I'll stop here today. Same principle, it is a gas laser. You take this diagram, helium neon laser. After this solid state laser, another, because there are certain drawbacks are there, to overcome the drawbacks, another type of laser is introduced, which is helium neon laser or gaseous laser. Principle, everything is same, active material is different, pumping mechanism is different. Please take this diagram. Shall I start? The students? Boys?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So as we discussed again, for producing this gaseous laser, you need again three devices. The first one is the pumping mechanism. So here it is discharge of electrodes. By applying high voltage, excitation takes place. So in the previous case, it is optical pumping. Xenon flash tube is used so that the ruby crystal is irradiated with green flash of light. Here it is different. It is discharge of electrodes. And active material is here helium neon mixture, which is taken in 10:1 ratio. And again, the optical resonator is the same. You have a full silvered mirror in the left side and a partial reflector at the right side, so that it can, the direction of the laser can be controlled. So this is the difference between helium neon laser and ruby laser. So the gas laser or helium neon laser consisting of a fused quad tube filled with a mixture of neon and helium. So there is a majority of helium atoms and a minority of neon atoms. As I said, it is in the ratio of 10:1. So the partial pressure of helium is 1 mm of mercury, whereas neon gas is 0.1 mm of mercury. Because of the number of molecules present per unit volume, this ratio has been considered. So it's a mixture of helium and neon, in which there are majority of helium ions and a minority of neon atoms, and they are taken in the ratio 10:1. The partial pressure of helium is around 1 mm of mercury, whereas for neon it is 0.1 mm of mercury. And this gas is filled in a quad tube, fused quad. The left side of the quad tube is fixed with a fully silvered mirror rod, perfectly reflecting surface, and the right side it is fixed with a partially reflecting surface. and the excitation can be taken by using these discharge electrodes. So using this discharge electrodes, high voltage is given to the gas mixture so that excitation of atoms takes place. So these are the main components of the helium neon laser. So there are certain drawbacks of Ruby laser. It can be rectified by using another type of laser, which is the gaseous laser. So in this helium neon gas, mixture of helium neon gas is taken and enclosed in a quantum tube. There is a majority of helium atoms and a minority of neon atoms. They are taken in the ratio 10:1, and the partial pressure of helium is 1 mm of mercury, whereas that of neon is 0.1 mm of mercury, and a perfect reflecting surface is fixed at the left end of the quantum tube. A partial reflector is arranged at the right side of the quantum tube, and discharge excitation of atoms can be done by passing high voltage by using the discharge electrodes. So this is the construction of the helium neon laser. So pumping is by electric discharge, active material is a helium neon mixture, and the resident cavity is a combination of partially reflecting surface at the right side and a perfect reflecting surface at the left side. So these are the three components involved. It is a 4-level gas laser. Its usual operation wavelength is 632.8 nanometers in the red portion of the visible spectrum. So it operates in continuous working mode. So continuous, whenever the discharge is there, ionization of gas takes place, it produces laser light. It's not a lot like that for Ruby laser. Only whenever there is a flash of light, Ruby laser pulse can be comes as an output. There is a time gap. So microseconds time gap will be there, but here it is a continuous mechanism. And the remaining procedure is same. So when initially high voltage is given, when discharge is allowed to pass through the gas mixture, then initially what happens is helium will be excited. Atoms of helium will be excited to their states energy level 2 and 3 respectively. So these atoms remain in the metastable state for a few milliseconds, and then they interact with the neon atoms. So neon atoms cannot rise themselves by this discharge. So via helium atoms only. So initially, whenever high discharge is allowed to pass to the gas mixture, helium atoms excite to their metastable states 2 and 3. No, they get sometimes so that they can interact with the neon atoms. So these helium atoms, which are there in the excited states 2 and 3, they interact with the neon atoms which are there in the lower energy state. So during this process, helium atoms return to the ground state, but neon atoms excite to their metastable states. So this is in this way, in indirect way, neon atoms can be excited to their metastable states 4 and 6 respectively, and the lifetime is more than 10 to the power of minus 8 seconds, approximately 10 to the power of minus 3 seconds. So this, and as this energy exchange continues, then what happens? The population of neon atoms will be more in the higher energy level than in the lower energy level, and thus population inversion is achieved. In this process, helium atoms de-excited and they come to the ground state, but they interact with the neon atoms. More number of neon atoms will be reaching the higher energy level. Population inversion is achieved. So once the population inversion is achieved, the procedure is the same. What we have discussed in Ruby laser, the same will happen here also. Initially, one neon atom, it comes to the ground state by emitting a photon. This photon interacts with another neon atom in the excited state. This by emitting a similar photon. These two photons are coherent, and they knock out two more photons from two excited atoms, so that the number will become 4. These 4 photons again interact with the 4 excited neon atoms in the metastable state, so they become 8. 8 photons will be released. The 4 excited atoms reaches the ground state. So this process continues. A laser beam is produced in the given quantum. So once it goes on the left side, it is completely reflected by the fully reflecting surface, and until and unless it has to knock out another photon from the excited atom, it is not allowed to pass to the partial reflector. So this, by this condition, a photon beam is produced which moves along the direction of the quantum, and once sufficient energy is reached, then with high energy and high into the partially reflecting surface and serves as a continuous gaseous laser. So this is the working principle of gas laser or helium neon laser. Principle is same, mechanism is also same, then the access, the materials are different here. So in the gas laser, it is a combination of helium and neon taken in the quality tube. Instead of optical pumping, discharge of electrons, high voltage is passed through the gas mixture. So initially helium atoms get excited, they reach their states 2 and 3. They are the metastable states for helium. Then they get sufficient time so that they can interact with the neon atoms in the ground state. During this process, exchange of energy takes place. Helium atoms comes to the ground state by exciting neon atoms to the levels 4 and 6, which are their metastable states. So after sometime immediately, metastable, the population inversion is achieved. More number of neon atoms are available in the higher energy state than on the lower energy state. So once population inversion is achieved, the first neon atom de-excited by emitting a photon. This photon knocks out another photon from the excited atom. This process continues. A chain reaction is produced. A photon beam is produced which moves along the direction of the parallel to the quadratic tube, and it is not allowed to pass through the left side because a perfect reflector is arranged. So unless it gets high energy, then it is allowed to pass through the partial reflector, which serves as a laser beam output. So this is the construction and the working of helium neon laser. And this energy level diagram, please you take what I have explained, the same is written here. You have in the notes also. So initially helium atoms will go to their F2 and F3 levels. Then they interact with neon atoms, and the neon atoms they rise to their E6 and E4 levels, and they reaches to E5 and E3 by emitting photons, which are coherent in nature. Please take this diagram. Otherwise, you take a screenshot. So these are the applications of helium neon laser. Interferometric experiments, meteorological applications, barcode reading, image processing, holography, these helium gas lasers are used. But these are not as popular as semiconducting laser because economy is also can be taken into consideration. Simply by simple diode with your finger size, now you can produce a laser light for a small application. Is this clear, students? Notes anyhow I will share, only I have explained today. Only this diagram you take. Respond, girls.
Yes, sir.
Boys.
Sir.
So today I am not going to continue because already I think all you are exhausted. In the today's session, I will give the gist only. First, we have derived an expression for the relation between Einstein coefficient. We have defined the postulates. Then we obtained the conditions relation between Einstein coefficient. Then what are the three important things required for producing laser we have discussed before discussing this lasing action, an active material, pumping mechanism, and optical resonator to confine the direction of the laser. These are the important accessories required for producing laser. And the process of producing laser involves all the three mechanisms of absorption. So by absorbing a photon, initial excitation takes place, then gets re-excited by emitting a photon, which is spontaneous emission. This photon is allowed to interact with another photon, another excited atom, so the two photons can be released. So by this, which is stimulated emission, three are involved simultaneously. A photon beam is produced, which is called as principle of laser or lasing action. And we have discussed the construction and working of Ruby laser. What are the components and how it works, and what are the merits and the demerits of Ruby laser we have discussed. Then gaseous laser, helium neon laser, how it works. It is a continuously, whenever the voltage is applied voltage is continuous, the output laser beam is also continuous. It can be achieved. And one more laser is there, that is semiconducting. So in the tomorrow's class, I'll discuss semiconducting laser, what is the working principle of a semiconducting laser, then a few applications of lasers we'll discuss tomorrow, so that I can complete this chapter. So in the next class, I'll start fiber optics. It takes two classes, I think I can complete the fiber optics. Then I'll start unit 3, in which you have a wave mechanics and electromagnetic field. By March 10th, probably, 20th, probably, you can complete the syllabus along with the notes. At this juncture, I'll stop. I take attendance now.
Sir, now for ECB section, that is our section, 11th of March, our offline labs are gonna start, sir. But 11th of March is Mahashivratri, so it is a holiday or not?
Holiday. Then next day. Got it? Online classes are as usual, but it will be compensated. We'll see how to make this. But how many experiments we have done? Those experiments can be given for lab examination. Okay, so nothing to worry about. Today is second now. So please, I'll share the time. Timetable is shared for you. Lab and online theory and lab. It is not there in your WhatsApp group. Okay, roll number 61. 61.